based on real events. The dim light of a small lamp gently illuminated the room. The warm hue seemed to envelop everything around, adding a cozy calm. The girl stood in front of a large antique mirror, admiring her reflection. She smiled slightly, touching the smooth glass with the tips of her fingers. In that moment, in the silence of the cozy evening, there was something almost magical, something that made her feel special. Her eyes shone as they traced the curves of her face, watching how the soft waves of her hair fell over her shoulders. She looked at herself as if she were something perfect, aware that, in that moment, she belonged only to herself, with no gaze or thought but her own. But suddenly, something disturbed this magical feeling. A noise like someone running down the hallway or a door slamming. The girl tensed, turning away from the mirror. She listened intently, her heart rate quickening slightly. Nothing seemed to indicate the source of the noise. She furrowed her brow, trying to understand what had happened. When she turned back to the mirror, her breath caught. The reflection in the mirror didn't move like she did. It was no longer just a reflection. Her own face, still beautiful and confident, but the eyes were no longer hers. The eyes in the reflection were cold, like ice, and a sinister shadow flickered in them. "Now you will do what I do," the reflection said, its lips slowly curling into a smirk. The words echoed in her mind, causing her body to freeze. A thought flashed through her head. Is this a dream? No, everything felt too real. Her fingers gripped the edges of the vanity, but she couldn't make herself look away. The reflection in the mirror slowly reached for the red lipstick on the edge of the table. She saw her own hand stretch forward, as though it weren't obeying her but merely following another will. She tried to stop it, to scream, to do something, but her body no longer belonged to her. The reflection opened the lipstick, never taking its eyes off her, and began applying it to its lips with slow, deliberate movements. The girl, in a trance, mimicked its actions. Her hand moved on its own, and soon her lips were painted crimson. She felt a chill of horror envelop her consciousness, but she couldn't stop. "Now you will be just like me," the reflection said, its voice filled with an indescribable power, stirring a wave of panic in her soul. The girl looked at her face in the mirror. But now it wasn't hers. The reflection in the mirror was alive, moving with a confidence that didn't belong to her. Her own appearance now seemed foreign, and her mind was frozen, locked in her own shadow, where she was no longer the master of herself. The mirror seemed to have absorbed the foreign darkness, and with each passing second, that darkness deepened within her. And when she looked into her own eyes, she saw something new, something terrifyingly unyielding. She was no longer herself. Diego arrived at the fortune teller, his movements uncertain as if he didn't fully believe this would help. But desperation pushed him forward. After all, he had lost the most precious thing, his wife, Claire. He sat across from the fortune teller, who, as if reading his thoughts, looked up at him. "My wife left me," Diego began, his voice full of pain and exhaustion. "I don't even know where she is or who she's with. She doesn't answer my calls, hasn't shown up at work. I even went to the police, but they laughed at me, saying they don't search for runaway wives." The fortune teller nodded, listening attentively to every word Diego spoke. "Diego, Taurus by sign, rooster by year, oak by tree, malachite by stone," he began, stumbling slightly. "Taurus rooster is open, honest, and hardworking, prone to precision, loves to be in charge. It's hard to get them angry, but when you do, they explode in rage. We never fought seriously, not once. We had minor disagreements, but we always made up. And then, out of nowhere, she packed her things and left." The fortune teller, sensing the tension in his words, slowly rose and took 2 candles. She placed them before Diego, then pulled out a mirror made of black obsidian and carefully ran her hand over its surface. "Now I'll see what's going on. I'll take these 2 candles, leave them in front of you, and use this black obsidian mirror to look into your fate, and your relationship. Think about your wife," she said quietly, her voice soft like a whisper, seductive and full of power. Diego closed his eyes, remembering the days when everything was still good, when Claire would greet him at the door, smile, and joke, as if the whole world was theirs. 3 days ago, I came home late from work, he began, sinking into the memories. Claire greeted me at the door. Hey, I missed you. How's everything? How's work? She asked. Same as always, end of the month, a ton of work piling up, I replied. She said she spilled salt, which led to an argument, and I laughed. We often teased each other like that. But then she started talking about how we might have to break up because I can't cook. I thought she was just joking, so I responded in the same playful manner. We laughed, and that was the end of it. But then she suggested going to the woods for the weekend. I declined, saying there was too much work. I suggested she go with her friends. The fortune teller nodded, listening to his story, then glanced back at the mirror. I see that you've been together for a long time, but you've been apart for 3 days now. What happened the next day? Diego sighed, remembering the morning. The next morning, Claire was like a different person. She packed her things and left. She didn't explain anything. I tried to stop her, but she just kept saying it was over between us. Even her voice wasn't hers. She always wore her hair down, but before she left, she gathered it into a bun and put on bright makeup, not like usual. That wasn't my Claire. The fortune teller listened intently, then took a handful of pepper and salt. She handed Diego a few peppercorns. Take them with your left hand and throw them on the salt, she said, watching his movements. Diego clenched a few peppercorns and threw them onto the salt. The fortune teller studied how they landed carefully. I see a significant rift between you, she said, her voice thoughtful. But it's not about the spilled salt. Spilled salt doesn't bring misfortune, but it can serve as a warning. You said that your wife seemed like a different person the next morning? Yes, Diego nodded. She was like someone else. The fortune teller took a glass and filled it with water. Hold the glass with your left hand for a while. Charge the water with your warmth, she said, watching as Diego carefully held the glass. Look at the water and think about your wife. Diego focused on the water, his thoughts turning to Claire. When he handed the glass back to the fortune teller, she lit a red candle and began dripping wax into the water. In Claire's life, you are not there right now, the fortune teller said, looking at the patterns that formed. She simply isn't thinking about you. Has she stopped loving me? Diego whispered, his voice full of despair. Claire is under the influence of another love, the fortune teller replied, her eyes gleaming as if seeing something no one else could. Claire has seen another life, another love, and that foreign life has taken her away from the family. Whose life could she have seen? When? Diego asked, his voice trembling with desperation. Yes, the fortune teller nodded, her expression serious. Before she left, she watched some movie. You can see another life in a movie. Find it and bring me that film. Diego felt a flicker of hope in his heart. If there was even the slightest chance to win Claire back, he would do everything to make it happen. Diego didn't know where to search for the disc with the movie Claire had watched. The fortune teller's words kept echoing in his mind, and he felt that this movie held the key to everything that had happened. But what troubled him even more was that Claire wasn't answering his calls. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air, vanished from his life without a trace. Diego had no idea where she was or what she was doing. At one point, despair led him to check her social media page. He hoped to find even the smallest clue, something that would help him understand where she was. And unexpectedly, he got lucky. He saw a message from someone named Georges, who had arranged a meeting with Claire at a cafe. The name sounded unfamiliar, but it was intriguing enough to catch his attention. Diego decided to find out who this mysterious Georges was. To his surprise, everything became clear soon after. Georges turned out to be Nicholas, Diego's colleague. They had only worked together for 6 months, but they had already become friends. Diego was shocked when he realized that Georges was actually Nicholas. He couldn't believe that someone he trusted could do this to him. Thoughts were spinning wildly in his head. Diego was certain that Claire had left for Nicholas, and that knowledge was tearing him apart. He couldn't just sit and wait, he needed to do something. So he decided to follow Claire and see for himself what was really happening. That evening, Diego saw her in the city, standing with Nicholas outside a small cafe. They were laughing, their faces so close that it seemed like the whole world had shrunk to just one moment for them. Diego stood in the shadows, unable to look away, feeling a mixture of rage and pain boiling inside his chest. When Claire hugged Nicholas goodbye, it felt as if his heart had been torn apart. They said their goodbyes, and Claire was left alone, heading toward her car. Without thinking about the consequences, Diego made his way toward her. She was lost in her thoughts, and his sudden appearance caught her off guard. Well, Claire and Georges, what a lovely couple. Diego began sarcastically, trying to hide his pain behind the words. Claire turned around, her eyes narrowing, and her expression grew cold. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice sounding as if she were talking to a stranger. "I saw your conversation online. I was wondering who this Georges guy was. Turns out, it's my friend Nicholas." Diego couldn't hold back the bitterness in his voice. "Are you spying on me?" Claire looked shocked but not scared. More like she was irritated. "What else am I supposed to do?" Diego took a step closer, his voice trembling. "I have a right to know where my wife went. I met Nicholas to return a disc." "That's it," Claire replied coldly, her eyes challenging him. Diego sighed, his face tense. "And what kind of movie was it?" he asked, not believing her words. "A great movie. A French twist," she answered, her lips curling into a slight smirk. "So how was the movie? Did you like it?" Diego tried to keep his composure, but his voice betrayed him, trembling with emotion. "Yes, I liked it. Nicholas has great taste." Claire said it with such confidence that Diego felt something snap inside him. "Why didn't you just tell me right away that you went to Nicholas?" His voice dropped to a whisper, filled with despair. Claire smirked, her eyes flashing. "You're wrong. There's nothing between me and Nicholas. And I don't owe you an explanation," she responded, her voice dripping with disdain. "Stop lying to me, I just saw it with my own eyes." Diego felt his fury rise within him, replacing the pain. Claire held his gaze for a moment, then it seemed like something inside her clicked, and she suddenly said, Yes, I went to Nicholas. I'm done with you. You're boring." Her words were deliberately sharp, meant to hurt him. Diego stared at her, and it felt like he was looking at a completely different person. This wasn't the Claire he knew and loved. Her eyes, her expression, everything about her felt foreign, cold, and cruel. She was no longer the woman who laughed with him over silly jokes and suggested weekend trips to the woods. She had changed, and he couldn't understand why or how it had happened. Diego stood at Nicholas's apartment door, his heart pounding, and his rage boiling inside him like a volcano ready to erupt. He couldn't wait any longer, he needed answers. He rang the doorbell, and the door opened shortly after. Nicholas stood there, his face lit up with a friendly smile. "Hey, Diego, come in," he said, but immediately felt the tension radiating from his friend. Diego didn't respond to the greeting, just stepped inside, his eyes full of anger. "What the hell are you doing, huh?" Diego shot, his voice low but full of power, making Nicholas freeze. "What?" Nicholas frowned, his smile disappearing instantly. "What are you talking about? What happened?" Diego took a step closer, his face twisted in pain and fury. "Can you explain?" he nearly growled. "I didn't expect this from you. I thought we were friends. And you went and stole my wife, you bastard." Nicholas recoiled, his eyes widening in shock. He raised his hands, trying to calm Diego down. Wait, Diego, what are you saying? I don't understand what you mean at all." His voice shook, panic creeping in. "You don't understand?" Diego took another step closer, his face right in front of Nicholas's. "Claire left me, and I saw your conversation online. How do you explain that?" Nicholas sighed heavily, his eyes searching for understanding in Diego's gaze. "You've got it all wrong," he exclaimed, his voice rising an octave. "We just met up, she gave me the disc. That's all, do you understand? You're misunderstanding everything. Don't lie to me anymore," Diego shouted, his fury crashing down on Nicholas like a storm. "How long has this been going on? Why didn't you tell me anything?" Nicholas tried to say something, but the words got stuck in his throat. He could see that Diego wasn't going to listen to any explanation. There was no trust left in his friend's eyes, only pain and betrayal. At that moment, Diego suddenly struck him in the face. The punch was hard, and Nicholas staggered back, crashing into the wall, his eyes wide with shock. Diego stared at him, his chest heaving, his fists clenched so tightly it hurt. Then he turned and left, leaving Nicholas lying on the floor. His footsteps echoed hollowly as he descended the stairs. He couldn't stay there any longer. His heart was torn apart, rage mixed with despair. It felt as if the entire world had collapsed, and he had lost everything that once mattered to him. When Diego stepped outside, the cold night air hit him in the face. He stopped, trying to calm the trembling in his hands. He was shattered. But the anger hadn't left him, and it was hard to breathe. He didn't know what to do next and felt lost, as if everything he knew had shattered into pieces. Diego went back to the fortune teller, exhaustion in his eyes, and the weight of heavy thoughts and doubts on his shoulders. He felt his life slipping out of control, and the only hope left was here, in this dim room filled with the scent of herbs and candles. "Did you bring the movie?" the fortune teller asked without looking up from her tools. Her voice was soft, but there was insistence in it. Diego shook his head, his gaze dark. "No, that's not important," he said firmly. "The movie Claire watched, millions of people have seen it. But I know what's going on. It's my colleague Nicholas, that bastard. He took my wife from me." The fortune teller looked at him, her eyes shining in the half-light. "Are you sure about this?" Her voice was calm, as though she knew something Diego couldn't understand. "Yes," he nodded sharply, his lips pressing into a thin line. "I saw them leaving the cafe together. But Claire was acting strange. Please, bring back my Claire. Make her the way she was." The fortune teller looked at Diego thoughtfully, then slowly nodded. "All right," she said, handing him a glass of water. "Drink, but leave a little in the glass." Diego took the glass, his hand trembling slightly. He drank some water and handed it back to the fortune teller. She placed it on the table, then pulled out a small glass orb. "Hold the orb," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Think about your wife and drop it in the water. I will charge the orb with your subtle life vibrations." Diego obediently took the orb and closed his eyes. His thoughts drifted back to Claire. He remembered her laughter, her smile, the moments when they were happy together. Then, without opening his eyes, he dropped the orb into the water. The fortune teller watched as the orb sank to the bottom of the glass. Then she looked up at Diego. "Place your left hand on the left half of the sphere and think of Claire, remember her," she said, handing him the orb. "Now place your right hand on the right half and think of Nicholas." Diego grimaced, his face twisting in displeasure. "I don't want to think about him," he exhaled, his voice trembling with fury. What a friend he turned out to be. The fortune teller nodded calmly. "You'll have to do this," she said softly but firmly. "You want to bring Claire back." Diego took a deep breath, his eyes full of tension. He didn't want to do this, but he had no choice. He placed his hands on the orb, closed his eyes, and concentrated. Images flooded his mind: Claire, her smile, her hands, then Nicholas, his face, their meeting. The memories caused pain, but he endured. "I don't want to get Nicholas back," he whispered, his voice soft, almost hopeless. "Yes," the fortune teller replied briefly. "Now, roll the two halves back together." Diego did as instructed, feeling his fingers tremble slightly. He handed the sphere back to the fortune teller, who took it and placed it on the table. Then she pulled out a small wooden wheel, delicately decorated with symbols, and began to spin it. I will create a circle of the order to see your fate, she said, her eyes growing deep, as if a light from another world had shone in them. Now, get 8 more wheels. Diego watched her movements, not understanding what was happening. But her words and motions completely captivated him. She stopped, her eyes focused on the wheel, and her face became serious. I see that there's nothing between Nicholas and Claire, she finally said, her voice full of certainty. Diego frowned, his face turning stern. But how can that be? He almost shouted. I saw them together when they were leaving the restaurant. She hugged him and kissed him. No, the fortune teller shook her head. I can clearly see that there's no romantic connection between them. Diego felt something inside him break. He didn't know what to think anymore. The fortune teller's words made him fall silent, but doubts and pain still burned in his heart. Then why did she leave me? Why has she changed? He whispered, his eyes full of despair. The fortune teller sighed, her eyes softening. I see danger, she said, her voice tense. Claire is going down a different path. Diego frowned. What danger? He asked, feeling his heart begin to throb again. I need the movie, the fortune teller answered. The one Claire watched before she left. Find it and bring it to me as soon as you can. Diego looked at her, feeling a spark of hope reignite within him. If there was even the slightest chance of getting Claire back, he would do whatever it took. Diego decided to track Claire down again, hoping her social media profile would offer some information. But to his surprise and bitterness, she had blocked him, cutting off his ability to keep tabs on her. It felt like a punch to the gut, another confirmation that Claire no longer wanted anything to do with him. Diego remembered the fortune teller's words. He needed to find that movie, but jealousy and anxiety gnawed at him. He waited at home for Claire to return. One late evening, he heard the door creak. Claire had come back, her face cold, and her eyes avoided his gaze. So, you're back, Diego said sarcastically, his voice trembling with mixed emotions. Don't you want to tell me anything? Claire didn't even look at him. She started rummaging through the closet, her movements quick and decisive. Just for a bit, I need to grab something, she answered curtly. Diego stepped closer, his eyes full of desperation. Leave the damn closet alone. We can talk calmly. He tried to get her attention, but Claire didn't stop. We have nothing more to talk about, she replied coldly, her voice final. Everything that needed to be said has been said. Found it, she pulled a small bag from the closet. I'm leaving for the Emirates tomorrow night. With Nicholas? Diego asked, his voice full of sarcasm and pain. Claire stopped and turned to face him, her eyes full of contempt. Do you really think I'd trade one boar for another? She snapped. I need a completely different man, strong and decisive. Diego felt his heart tighten, and took a step forward. I'm not letting you go anywhere, he said, his voice dropping to a low growl, but the threat was clear. Claire smirked coldly, her eyes flashing. It used to be that men decided everything for women, she said. But now women know for themselves who they want to love, what kind of man they need. That's it, goodbye. She turned and walked out, leaving Diego standing in the empty room, his heart broken, his mind racing, restless. He realized that Nicholas wasn't to blame for Claire leaving him. He felt ashamed for the scene he had caused last time. But there was one thing that still wouldn't let him be the movie. He had to find out which film Claire watched before she left him. Diego decided he had to go back to Nicholas. He came to his house, his face showing apology, but there was still determination in his eyes. Nicholas, I'm sorry, Diego started when the door opened. I know you weren't to blame, but when I saw you with Claire, I just lost it. Nicholas looked at him, his expression softening, and he sighed. It's fine, forget about it, he replied, shrugging. Diego tried to smile, but pain was clear in his eyes. You don't understand, I love her so much. And recently everything's been falling apart. The thing is, I can't figure out what's going on in her head. Why did she leave me? Nicholas shook his head, his eyes filled with sympathy. Well, I can't help you with that, he said, shrugging again. Diego frowned, then suddenly asked, "Nicholas, you can help. Remember, you gave her that movie to watch." "Yeah, that happened, so what?" Nicholas looked a bit surprised, his gaze becoming cautious. "Can you give it to me?" Diego looked tense. "Why do you want it?" "A French movie isn't going to interest you," Nicholas answered, his voice slightly nervous. "Nicholas, this is really important," Diego pleaded. "Please, give me that movie." Nicholas sighed, then, muttering a bit, went over to the shelf. "Fine, just don't complain that it's boring," he said, handing Diego the disc. "Here." "Thanks," Diego said, taking the disc. "You're welcome," Nicholas replied, just as his phone rang. "Hello?" "Yeah," he said, walking into another room to talk. Seizing the opportunity when he was left alone in the room, Diego walked over to the cabinet where the discs were kept and carefully examined it. Between some books, he spotted another disc wrapped in paper, almost hidden from view. Diego took it and slipped it into his pocket, then headed toward the door. He knew that Nicholas was hiding something from him, and now he was sure this disc could be the key to everything. Back at home, Diego wasted no time. He immediately put the disc into the player and started watching, feeling something vague rise inside him, fear or hope. Maybe this movie would finally explain why Claire had changed. Diego sat in the dimly lit room, his eyes fixed anxiously on the TV screen. The movie he got from Nicholas began with an old video recording. The picture was a bit blurry, as if shot on an old camcorder, but one detail immediately caught his eye: the girl in the frame. She looked exactly like Claire, wearing a wedding dress. Diego struggled to breathe, he couldn't believe his eyes. What is this? When was this? Why didn't he know about it? The scenes on the screen flickered. The girl in the white dress was laughing, her eyes sparkling with happiness, and her lips spoke of love. The camera was shaky, as someone was filming her, trying to capture every moment. Soon, Nicholas appeared on screen, his voice soft but carrying a hidden irony. "Sweetie, cuckoo, let me kiss you," the girl said playfully, smiling straight at the camera. She leaned toward Nicholas and lightly touched the lens with her lips. "Champagne? Yes, I want champagne, champagne." Nicholas smirked, and his face appeared in the frame. He looked pleased, as if everything that was happening brought him incredible satisfaction. "So, can you see me?" The girl took a few steps back, turning toward the camera. "Can you see me? Are you filming?" Nicholas nodded, and his voice sounded slightly condescending. "You broke the mirror," he said, turning the camera to the shards of glass scattered on the floor. "Wedding day, that's a bad omen." The girl waved her hand, her smile never fading. "I don't believe in omens," she said, her eyes lighting up with determination. "I'm the master of my own fate." Nicholas squinted, a hint of mockery in his voice. "Well, not exactly the master," he said, stepping closer to her. "I'm your husband, so I get to decide a few things about your fate too." The girl laughed, her laughter ringing out, but there was tension in it. "Sweetheart, it used to be that men decided everything," she said, shaking her head slightly. "But now, women can decide their own fate. Who they love, who they don't love, who should be by their side. I think that's worth a drink, don't you?" Nicholas smirked again, his gaze sharp, as though he were trying to understand something hidden behind her words. The camera wobbled slightly as he approached the table and poured champagne into 2 glasses. He handed one to the girl, who raised it in a toast. "To freedom," she said, her voice firm, and Diego felt something snap inside him. This girl, she looked so much like Claire. But was it really her? Or was it just an illusion created by his jealousy and despair? Diego didn't know, but a feeling was growing inside him that the answer to everything lay in this recording. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the screen, his heart racing as if it were trying to grasp something that eluded his mind. Diego went back to the fortune teller, his gaze full of worry and uncertainty. In his hands, he held the disc, the one he had gotten from Nicholas. His heart was pounding, he didn't know what to expect, but he was certain that this disc was the key to everything that was happening. I brought what you asked for, he said, entering the room. But it's not a movie, it's a home video. There's a girl in it, she looks like Claire. I mean, Claire started to look like this girl. The fortune teller looked at him carefully, then glanced at the disc in his hands. This is what you saw, she said, a touch of mystery in her voice. Let me see what it really is. She reached out and took the disc. The room was silent, only the soft light from the candles illuminating her thoughtful face. She closed her eyes, holding the disc with both hands, as if trying to feel its energy. Then, she opened her eyes and nodded. That's correct, she said. This is an unusual home video. This is the path Claire is on. Can you remember the image of the girl you saw in the video? Diego slowly nodded, his face focused. Yes, I can, he said, recalling every moment of the recording. I watched it several times. The fortune teller pulled out a small bowl and handed it to Diego. Take this bowl with both hands and hold it, she said, her voice quiet but strong. Diego did as she instructed, his fingers trembling slightly as he held the bowl. Now, place the bowl on the disc. Diego carefully placed the bowl on the disc, his eyes filled with questions. The fortune teller closed her eyes, her lips began to whisper something, and suddenly the air in the room seemed heavier, filled with invisible energy. I see the girl from the video on the disc, the fortune teller finally spoke, opening her eyes. She died a year ago. Diego felt his breath catch. His heart stopped for a moment, then started racing again, faster than before. What does that mean? He whispered, unable to believe what he had just heard. The fortune teller sighed, her eyes filled with sympathy. There's a curse on this disc, she said. It only affects women. Right now, it's affecting Claire. But if the disc isn't destroyed, Claire will die. She'll die just like the girl in the video. Diego felt the world around him darken, his head spinning from the horror of the thought that Claire might die. Then let's destroy the disc, he shouted, his voice full of desperation. What are we waiting for? The fortune teller shook her head, her expression turning serious. It's not that simple, she said quietly. The disc must be destroyed by the one who made the recording, and the one who cast the spell. Diego froze, his eyes wide open, and he realized that everything was leading back to one person. Nicholas, he whispered, his voice trembling. The name sounded like a verdict, like the last chance to save Claire. Now he had to face Nicholas again, and this time, it was much more serious. Diego set off determinedly toward Nicholas. His heart beat with both anxiety and resolve. He knew that Nicholas had to know the truth about the girl in the video and the curse placed on it. Nicholas had to destroy the disc, only then could he save Claire. When Diego entered the apartment, Nicholas greeted him with his usual smile. Want some tea? He asked, pointing to the kitchen. Diego gritted his teeth, holding back his impatience. He couldn't afford to waste time on pleasantries. How's Claire? She still hasn't come back? Nicholas asked, trying to keep the conversation going. Diego shook his head. No, she hasn't come back, his voice was cold. But I need your help again. Nicholas furrowed his brow, his gaze tense. How can I help? You've already seen that she didn't leave for me. Diego stepped closer abruptly, his eyes flashing with anger. Sorry, had to pull it out, he said, pulling the disc from his pocket. Nicholas tensed up, his face contorted in irritation. What right do you have to watch my recordings, huh? He shouted. Diego held the disc up in front of him, his voice full of determination. Then why did you show it to Claire? Nicholas nervously licked his lips, then tried to explain. It accidentally got into the box, I gave it to Claire by mistake. Diego stared at him closely, then asked the most important question. Who's the girl in the video? Nicholas went silent, his eyes darkened. He turned away and began speaking in a quiet voice. That's Isabella, my wife. I filmed her right after our wedding, and a couple of years later, she left me, he sighed, pain evident in his voice. And this recording. You know what it's like when someone leaves you. I watch this recording every day, and on the anniversary night, I completely lost it. Nicholas began to recall that night. He had been drunk, sitting on the couch and playing the video. Her voice echoed in the room, her laughter, and then her words. "Sweetheart, cuckoo, let me kiss you. Champagne? Yeah, champagne." Back then, in his drunken haze, Nicholas whispered with hatred, "You'll come back to me, or die." His memories faded, and he continued telling Diego. "So, where is Isabella now? What happened to her?" Diego couldn't wait any longer, his voice shaking. "I don't want to talk about it." Nicholas turned away, his face darkening. Diego didn't back down. "Nicholas, tell me, this is really important." Nicholas sighed, his voice low. "Why are you looking at me like that? I'm not to blame. It was all the plane malfunction. When it took off, problems started immediately. The flaps didn't work. The plane crashed, and Isabella died. Got it?" Diego frowned, his face set in determination. "Where was the plane flying to?" Nicholas shrugged, his expression distant. "I don't remember. What's the difference?" Diego grabbed Nicholas by the shoulder. "It makes a huge difference. Think, Nicholas. Where was that damn plane flying to?" Nicholas frowned, then said, "I think it was to the Emirates. Isabella flew to the Emirates with her lover." Diego froze, his heart skipped a beat. He whispered, "To the Emirates. Claire is going to the Emirates too. She's repeating Isabella's fate. Do you understand that?" Nicholas shook his head. "It's just a coincidence." "No, Nicholas, you have to destroy that disc, or Claire will die," Diego almost yelled, his voice full of desperation. Nicholas shook his head, his face hardening. "No way. That's the only memory I have of Isabella." "Nicholas, you have to do it," Diego pleaded. "No, no, and no," Nicholas answered firmly. Diego realized he wouldn't be able to convince Nicholas to destroy the disc. He had to find another way to save Claire. He had to stop her from getting on that plane. Without wasting any time, Diego ran out of the building and called the airport. "What time is the flight to the Emirates?" He listened to the response, and a cold fear gripped him. The plane had already taken off. Diego felt something snap inside him. He sat down on a bench near his house, overwhelmed by despair. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was Nicholas. Diego, is that you?" Nicholas's voice sounded frantic. "I destroyed the disc. Do you hear me? It's time to start a new life, not keep dwelling on the past." Diego sighed, tears filling his eyes. "It's too late. The plane already took off," he whispered. He went home, his heart broken. He lay down on the bed, sinking into sadness. It felt like he had lost Claire forever. But then, the door to his room opened, and he heard a familiar voice. "Hey." Diego shot up, unable to believe his eyes. "Claire." She stood in front of him, her eyes filled with tenderness and regret. "Can you believe it? I missed the flight," she said, smiling. "Of course, I could have changed the tickets, but at some point, I realized I didn't want to go anywhere, not to the Emirates." Diego felt his heart fill with warmth. He couldn't believe she was here, with him. "I'm sorry," Claire whispered, her eyes full of tears. "I'm so sorry. I acted crazy. Said all sorts of nonsense." Diego walked toward her and hugged her, feeling all his worries melt away. "Let's talk about it later," he said, his voice full of love and relief. "Someday. You're with me, and that's all that matters." There were still many challenges ahead for Diego and Claire. Their relationship was like a seesaw. Sometimes they were happy together, then sudden disagreements and old resentments forced them apart. There were times when it seemed like everything was over forever, but over time, they found their way back to each other. Every time they returned, they realized they couldn't live without each other, no matter how hard it was. Love, though not always quiet and peaceful, was what bound them together again and again. In the end, despite all the quarrels and pain, they stayed together, and that was what mattered most. A year later, Nicholas found his destiny too. He met a woman who was his complete opposite, sincere, loving, ready to support and accept him for who he was. She didn't try to replace Isabella, didn't demand his past, she was simply there, offering him new hope and love. But after everything that had happened, Nicholas was no longer willing to repeat his old mistakes. He even turned down wedding photos. Wedding videos, which had once been a symbol of happiness for him, now seemed like an ominous reminder of what could happen if you don't let go of the past. This story became a lesson for everyone involved, and even for those who may hear it from others. If, by chance, someone else's personal video recordings end up in your home, never watch them without permission. Such recordings retain the energy of the person who made them and the person who is featured in them. No one knows what kind of energy that is or what kind of marks it may leave. Sometimes, after watching such recordings, undesirable changes can occur in your consciousness, strange thoughts, feelings that you've never had before, or even behaviors that feel foreign to you. To protect yourself and your loved ones, it's best to return the disc to its owner. But if you don't know who that is, never throw the disc away. On the contrary, wrap it in paper and write these words on it: I will not touch anyone, I will not show myself. These words will help keep the energy of the disc neutral until the person it belongs to appears. Until then, just wait. Perhaps the owner of the video will one day knock on your door, and then this whole story will come to its end.